Welcome to this week's edition of the DC Life presented by the Fight Shop New Mexico. I'm your host, Sal Moore. I got my co-host, Mike Frankel. And we're live on cageminds.com right now. And we're going to talk about, we're going to jump right into it because we got a busy week. It's fight week. UFC 193 is happening this Saturday night. Come join the Fight Shop New Mexico. We're going to be at Uptown Sports Bar and Grill. But right now I want to talk to you about Bellator 145. That happened Friday night. Micah, let's run through the card real quick and give us your thoughts on that event.
I thought it was a fun event. The main card started off with the great fight between Justin Lawrence and Emmanuel Sanchez. They grinded out. It was a fight that set the internet on fire because everyone's debating about the decision. Lawrence controlled the pace and the distance for the first round, the majority of the second round, and then a slapping right head kick from Sanchez lands and changes the whole course of the fight. The judges, it was kind of a close round with him grinding up against Lawrence against the cage. Two judges gave him that round, and that would ultimately seal it for him as Sanchez would control the third round. So it started off with a bang.
Started out with a bang, and then you had WWF, WWE, and TNA wrestling. He's not in the limelight as much as Brock Lesnar, say CM Punk, but Bobby Lashley defeated James Thompson via TKO. Tell us how that TKO happened.
Lashley shot in, low single leg. His shoulder took out Thompson's knee. Thompson hit the ground, and from there Lashley just had his way with him, pounding him out. Lashley even said, "I heard his knee pop." So it was a pretty easy TKO from there, but a decisive end to their bickering of how the first fight went.
Absolutely. And then Michael Chandler, of course, outclassed. I feel that was the most mismatched fight on this card. I mean, I like David Rickles, the caveman. When he came to Albuquerque, New Mexico, he always brought it, always had it, was one of the fan favorites here in New Mexico. But you just saw two different levels of MMA class.
We saw it the first time when Chandler knocked him out here, and this fight was more put together from Chandler's losing streak than Rickles earning his way back into that Bellator top echelon. And there was a right hook that right across the nose, hit the meat of the nose, and from there Rickles was just a faucet and got pounded out. Chandler, aggressive, looked good, and we know he wants to get back in the title hunt, but he needs several more wins to get a shot at Will Brooks again.
And then speaking of Will Brooks, he's a guy that's a local fan favorite as well. He was here, I believe, 2 or 3 times fighting twice here for the Bellator events that happened in the past, and he retained his title.
Unanimous decision. The scores, I think they gave him most of the rounds. He took 4 rounds to 1, held, got the fight to the ground, nearly had the knee bar cinched in the first round. It actually did cause an injury to Brooks, and that from there, with that knee injury, Brooks took the fight back down to the ground and pounded out Held for 4 rounds, showed superior defense. There was also a part in the third round where Held had a toe hold, and it was bent back, and you could actually see the excruciating look coming over Brooks's face, and he was grimacing, and it all of a sudden enlightened him that he could stick out his hands and lift Held's hands off of his foot and slip out of the hold. Outside of that, he cruised for 4 rounds of ground and pounding, and got to give to Marcin Held for just taking abuse and being game to go after those leg locks, trying to play his game.
Where, in your opinion, does Will Brooks go from here?
I don't know what they're going to do to get him another challenger. They haven't really promoted their lightweight division. Michael Chandler, it looks like Josh Thompson would probably be the name, actually. There it is, Josh Thompson. Hit me right on the head after I thought about it. The Punk, he's a huge name for Bellator. They got him main eventing Bellator 147, so I wouldn't be surprised if that catapults him up to a title shot. That'd be 2 wins in Bellator, and he's a big name, and Brooks would want a big name then to add to his resume. That would be the fight to make.
Absolutely. I think it's Brooks right now and everybody else underneath him, a few steps behind him in the Bellator lightweight division.
Well, with Brooks, it's also interesting because there was some kind of skirmish. They really didn't want to talk into it. So a Pitbull brother could fight him just because there's animosity there, because that would also sell. But I think Thompson is the more logical choice.
And then the main event.
The main event, Daniel Strauss put it on Friday for about 4 out of 5 rounds. The first 4 rounds, he even hit him with a great double jab with the right and a straight left that did drop Pitbull in the second round. Had him on the brink of the finish, but Pitbull is a tough dude. Survived it. He came out winging big hooks. looking for the knockout in the 5th round, even took Strauss's back. It looked like a replay of their second meeting, had everyone freaking out, and Strauss this time threw him off his back, got back up. They exchanged in the pocket to the very end. Strauss 4 rounds to 1, took unanimous decision win, and congratulations to my good friend on becoming the 2-time Bellator featherweight champion.
Yeah, I mean, he looked great in there. He looked like he was hungry, he looked like he wanted it, and Patricio still looked like he was still fighting with Will Brooks in the lobby of the hotel, still worried about that kind of stuff.
Patricio, for everything I've liked about him, and he is one of the top winners, has one of the top most win rates in Bellator, but he hasn't evolved that much. He still throws the same technique to deny it.
Bellator also announced, and again, people love to criticize me with their matchups and whatnot, but we saw it, and we're going to talk about the fun fight that the UFC had on Saturday night with the 2 old men in the main event. But Bellator announced that Ken Shamrock versus Royce Gracie will happen again inside the Bellator cage.
February 19th in Houston, Texas.
Yes. What's your thoughts? First thoughts come to mind.
My first initial thought was a sigh of relief that they did not announce Kurt Angle versus Ken Shamrock like the internet had been rumoring. I shuddered to think about that because of Ken Shamrock, or because of Kurt Angle and the wear and tear he's put on his body. For Shamrock, who obviously wants to continue to compete and is in the financial spot to need to compete, this is really one of the best fights you could get him because it is a grudge match, it is a rivalry. The only thing that I was surprised about was Royce Gracie having the itch to come back, because I thought he was in a point where he was good after having last competed, I believe, 8 years ago. That part I found slightly surprising. Correct? Yeah, he won his last fight. Everyone thinks his last fight was Matt Hughes. Check out Sherdog. He had a fight a year later in Japan. Royce went out on top then, so I thought he was good and done. So I find that interesting, but it was also, anyone that goes to a Bellator fan fest could possibly end up in their cage as, Sakuraba, Royce, Ken Shamrock. So all bets are off with that.
They're fun fights, and they're no different than what the UFC put on Saturday night.
The only thing that I say, I know your opinion, the only thing I got to say on the contrary is that at least Henderson and Belfort for the last several years have been active. Sure. And Shamrock and Royce had their sessions of where I thought they were retired, and after being pioneers and putting such a wear and tear on their bodies, I hope for them that they were able to have been retired.
The fight that I'm taking issue with more so than anything else is the fight that they announced is 2 former street fighters, Kimbo Slice and Dada 5000, whatever his name is. The 2 fighters, they're former friends. One was a bodyguard for the other, something like that. They're both from Florida, and they're gonna be fighting each other. One's 2-0 inside MMA, the other one is 5-2. What's your thoughts on that fight?
I'm a little surprised about it because that one feels like a real grab, a real stretch for attention. I looked at Kimbo, and I even said it, I kind of gained respect for him from The Ultimate Fighter. Because from when he went to the UFC, and then he even kept progressing in MMA, and when he gave up on MMA, he went to boxing, had 7 boxing matches, so he was doing everything legal and legit after having been a street fighter. This one, it's just a name because I think everyone was looking out there, and you couldn't seriously think that they were going to put Bobby Lashley against Kimbo Slice. So they needed someone that could fight Kimbo in Kimbo's realm, and these 2 are going to stand up and brawl with each other. And that's fighting 3 to 4 minutes. Someone will get knocked out quick and early. Anyone else that fights Kimbo is either going to try to pull a Houston Alexander and kick out his legs to sell a fight that Kimbo could win.
This is... I've been told I'm the one that always tries to defend Bellator and whatnot. This is a fight I cannot. The UFC cares wouldn't have the guts to get in there and keep trying to live off their fame. Then came out and beat Ken Shamrock. Everybody said it was fixed. It's not fixed. Ken Shamrock's old. The reaction time isn't there. I don't like this fight. I think it's not a very good fight. I mean, you go from fighting a veteran and Matt Mitrione, those type of fighters, to now you're fighting your former friend, street fighter.
Yeah, this really is his weakest competition actually in MMA when you look at it, because we talked about Matt Mitrione, Houston Alexander. these guys had names. Even Seth Petroselli, these guys had records. If you look at Dead of 5000, people are putting up, there's a video going around online of one of his 2 MMA fights, which I believe it's been 4 years since he's had a legal sanctioned fight. And in that fight, he looked like what we would see out of a first-time amateur heavyweight, winging punches, no technique, and just scoring a knockout out of his power. So Kimbo should run through this guy, technically.
A first-time amateur in basketball shorts with no tape on their pockets, getting in the cage, and you're seeing it live on Spike TV, which is broadcast to over 98 million homes. I don't agree with the fight. I understand they want the eyeballs, but where do you know where this fight card is? It's Texas, right?
Houston, Texas. So this is going to be right there in the heart of their popularity in the South.
Me personally, I would take it to Florida. But I understand they would probably be afraid of brawls happening between the camps, in the crowd and whatnot, and outside, maybe even spill over into the streets.
And I believe that they even said this is going to be at the Toyota Center. So this is going to be
the big one.
The big one. This, and that's a little hard for me to could get through, is that this is the big one. I mean, this Bellator 145 to me was one of the pinnacles for Bellator, because you had Will Brooks, Daniel Strauss, the Patricky Pitbull. You had these guys that have put in time, had a lot of cage time with Bellator, and for us that have watched the promotion forever, we've grown watching these guys in their 145 events. But now you're going to put on your biggest event, and I just hope that they bring some of these guys onto the card, because the 5000 Kimbo is kind of a lackluster co-main event.
They're deserving of it, and that's where I fall back, and I feel bad is for the fighters that are really fighters, that are champions, and they're just getting blown by the promotion. I understand it's a business and they got to hit numbers and whatnot and viewerships to stay alive, to stay afloat. And I'm sure Scott and company have had conversations with their champions about that, and that's what a lot of these people, whether it's local scene or national scene, a lot of people don't understand that it truly is a business. It's about ticket sales, it's about fan interaction, it's not just, let's just let the fighters fight. If your mentality is that's so 1990s, late 1990s, early 2000s, the reality is you want to fight for money, you have to play along and play the game of the promotion. And if there's a freak show fight that'll bring more eyeballs, then great. But stack the undercard, like you just said, with the champions and with the people that put in their blood, sweat, and tears to build their names up, hopefully.
And I got no problem with Bellator getting money, but I do have a certain fear for MMA when we're still relying on Royce Gracie and Ken Shamrock 30 years later to sell a promotion. I shudder for Bellator because, again, they just came off their 145th event, 147th actually, because they've been doing the mini events at the motocrosses with Monster. So they've had 147 events, and they've made exactly 1 star, Eddie Alvarez, that left to the UFC. So as a whole, it's been hard to sell this as a brand. And just even, as we said, Will Brooks, Daniel Strauss, some of these guys have been on the main cards 10 times. So what do you got to do to sell some of these younger fighters to make them stars?
Scott Coker has the magic potion. He did it in Strikeforce. Look at all his Strikeforce fighters are over in the UFC. Cain Velasquez, Strikeforce fighter. DC Strikeforce fighter.
Was Cain?
Yeah.
Okay, I just know he came in the UFC at like 6-0, right?
Yeah.
Or 8-0. It was pretty quick.
He fought for Strikeforce prior to
I know Strauss came from there.
Clay Guida was in Strikeforce.
Right. Gilbert
Melendez. I mean, these guys were built up. Kung Lee, he was there as well and moved over to the UFC. Luke Rockhold was another one that was part of the Strikeforce. So he knows how to build stars. I don't know what they're waiting for. I don't know if they're waiting for, get all the wrinkles out and whatnot of the last regime and then start fresh in 2016. So he has the plan. It's just, I'm curious to see what he's doing.
I'm curious, and I'm just hoping that Liam McGeary is a star, because you beat Tito Ortiz.
He should
What
be.
more can this guy do now?
Should be. And he seems very personable. I mean, he talks to everybody. From what I can tell from sitting at my own house and watching it on TV.
Well-spoken, nice guy, all the behind the scenes. He's upbeat, he's chipper. And then Bellator also just can't wait for some of these big fights to come together, because on their last event, 144, we've seen guys still like Brendan Ward and Michael Page. They're stars in the making, and they are just picking apart 500 fighters right now. Some of it we've heard has been problems with guys accepting fights. Some of it is we need to get these young guys together and see who really does get a title shot.
Absolutely. I mean, they have one young guy right now that's, 5-0, 6-0 from New Mexico, Steve Garcia, in their bunch that they can push. And it's just like, what are they doing with him? I mean, you're 6-0, he's exciting. I don't think he's gone to a decision, has he?
No. I think one time.
Was it Sean Bunch that he went to a decision?
I believe so. No, Bunchy TKO. There was one fight
third
he
round.
did.
Yeah, he
did.
He
He
gassed
has 4
him and beat him.
TKOs and 1 decision, I believe. They might all actually be knockouts.
That's it.
What are they doing with Steve?
Fight. Like, come on, you got to do something with that young guy. He's, 21, 22 max?
Exactly, and that's the division. I love their bantamweight division, but they have a problem right now, and they need to get out of this triangle of Dantas Gaval and their love obsession with Joe Warren.
Yep, absolutely. Let's move on to Saturday night. UFC on Fox Sports 1.
Oh, wait. One more thing from Friday. Got a shout out to Landon Venata, who crushed Chad Curry at RFA 32 with a right hand. Hope he recovers quickly from breaking his hand. Landon Venata now 7-0. You guys need to keep that name in mind.
And he's out of the Jackson Winks camp here in Albuquerque. I know he's been itching for a fight. Tough break on breaking your hand. I'm sorry about that, but congratulations on your win. Let's move on to Saturday night UFC in Brazil. It was on Fox Sports 1. Let's start off. Take us through the winners.
Let's start at the top. Talk about the old man. Vitor Belfort, Dan Henderson. Almost a replay of their second meeting. Henderson kind of dips to the right, takes a left kick to the shin, falls down. Vitor gets on top of him, lands a right hand that flash knocks out Henderson, and Mario Yamasaki is about 2 seconds late getting in. So by the time he's actually getting in, Henderson's awake and like, why are you stopping it? But he was out.
Yeah.
So he was out. It was just the stoppage was a split second late, so he was awake and alert afterwards. Vitor Belfort looked like Brazil Vitor Belfort. That's the best way to put it right now. When he fights in Brazil, he looks like a monster every time except for the Anderson Silva fight. Henderson and him, they both had way too much respect for each other. Henderson never got any offense going, and the fight ended very quickly.
Yeah, it was an interesting fight. And that's what I'm talking about. It is an old man fight, whether they're active or not. They're both in their 40s, I believe, correct? Or Vitor's like 39. He's right there. I think Dan Henderson is like 45.
Something like that.
So,
ageless, timeless.
Where does Dan Henderson go from here?
He does whatever he wants. The dude just doesn't want to stop fighting. So,
but it's going to come a point in time where he's going to have to.
It's going to come a point in time. I just don't know if it's
UFC.
now. I just don't know if it's now because he came off the win over Boach, and then he loses this one. So he's kind of been up and down.
What is he, 8-8 inside the UFC?
Something like that. As long as he's still selling gear and selling main events and coming to get knocked out or knock you out, the UFC is probably going to keep him as long as he wants to fight, because the alternative is letting him go and him signing to Bellator.
And that's probably what would happen.
Would happen. They know that. They recognize if he wants to compete, he's going to. He went to Strikeforce once. He could go to Bellator again. So.
Yeah, it would be interesting. And the interesting thing with Dan Henderson is he's an Olympian. He has wrestling background, and this guy does not use it. You would think as he gets older, he would want to set up with that wrestling and then beat people up with that big right hand. Because that's what everybody knows. Everybody knows Dan turns like his shoulder and loads this right hand up, and you know it's coming. That's what you got to worry for. His little kick to the knee shin, and then he throws that overhand right over. That's what he's got. That's his MO. You would think he'd change it back to going back to his bread and butter, which was wrestling all his life, and he just didn't do it. I don't know where he goes from here. What one fight would you say off the top of your head?
I don't know. He can move back up to 205, and I don't know, fight Rampage if Rampage comes back again. I know that they wanted to do it. He could fight Shogun again. He's at 85. Machida's coming off some losses. They could fight.
Put those two guys together? Sure.
After he fought Tim Boach, it kind of opened everything up to me, because I thought that fight was kind of beneath him.
Sure.
With his, legendary status. Once he took that fight, I'm like, this opens anyone as a possibility.
He'll fight
anybody. That's what I saw when I saw him take that fight.
Sure. And your next winner?
Oh, the co-main event, we had Glover Teixeira and Clark Patrick Cummins. This dude doesn't get fights. walks into the UFC and fights Cormier, gets a couple wins, and then they throw him right into the Lions Den with a former title challenger like Teixeira, Teixeira, for as much good as he did, I just don't feel he's looking better. He looks kind of older and slower, but he hit him with big left hooks, big right uppercut, overwhelmed Cummins in the corner. Cummins was bleeding, got the TKO. Cummins did get several takedowns, but was never able to establish any control on the ground.
He looked decent for a little bit. It surprised me. I thought it was going to be over in the first round, and like quickly. And it just wasn't. He actually, like I said, he got some takedowns. He got a couple submission attempts.
When you think about the Glover Teixeira that outboxed Rampage, and you think that Patrick Cummins actually stood up with him for a round, you're kind of like, wow.
Very, very interesting on his end. He's in a funny position. He's in the Vitor Belfort position, in the sense of who should we put him next with,
Glover.
Because you just mentioned he's Rampage is fighting, wants to fight, or possibly fight Dan Henderson.
That's another thing. The 205 division's so weird because he's fought guys like Fabio Maldonado. I'm like, I guess an Ovin St. Peru, or is he coming off of a win or a loss? Didn't he get knocked out by somebody?
I want to say, no, he won. He won against Gegard Mousasi, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
So I think
I don't know. This is the problem with the UFC these days. If guys like us can't even keep up with them, there's too many fights going on.
Exactly. I think Teixeira, Ovin St. Peru sounds about right. Or there could be a possibility of him probably having to fight a loser because there's Alexander Gustafsson's looking for a fight. Rashad would be looking for a fight.
What do you think about the knockout of the night?
Thomas Almeida is a force to be reckoned with, and bantamweights beware. Knocked Anthony Burchak out with a dirty right cross. Had beat him up with elbows on the inside. He threw everything at him and went down like a ton of bricks. I saw a meme up that says you never go full Rashad. If you remember how Rashad got knocked out, bent backwards, and poor Anthony, he ended up about in the same position. It was a dirty knockout. Almeida showed some levels to his game that we did not believe he had because he defended takedowns. He even sprawled out of a takedown. He did not let the fight get to the ground. And bantamweight, we got a contender. That's awesome to see because I'm getting tired of Dillashaw and Cruz and Faber being all the talk. So it was a light into the 135-pound division that they desperately needed.
Absolutely. Overall, it was a good fight card. It was entertaining. It had 2 good nights of fights. But that wasn't it for fight night. You had also on HBO, you had the Bradley Rios fight. Did you get a chance to catch that at all?
I didn't, but I had actually talked with a former local boxer, Hollywood Raymond Montez, and we were on the same wavelength, thinking that Bradley would, if nothing else, take a decision, and he did even more than that, scoring the TKO, I believe.
Yeah, and I believe it was in the 9th round, if I'm not mistaken. I got to see some of it, hit and miss. And it was an interesting fight because he just left his old trainer, who's been with him forever, pretty much, and Bradley, and he went with Teddy Atlas. So it was a good test to see where he was at. Teddy was telling him a lot of different movements, and he was listening to Teddy. Old habits do die hard. He was making some minor mistakes, but for the most part, he looked a little bit more improved, cut a few angles a little bit better than what he was in the past, and it's interesting to see where he's gonna go from here. He's kind of in the same thing as the Vitor Belfort, and
who do I fight? Where do I go?
Where do I go now? It'll be interesting to see. However, the point of me bringing up this boxing is I had them both side by side. I had the UFC up on one, I had the boxing on the other. The hand speed difference is amazing. And I guess I've never noticed it before with the boxers and the MMA fighters. MMA fighters' hands are totally different than a boxer's hands.
Well, yeah, because they're worrying about kicks and takedowns
True.
And changing levels.
And you can say that, but the skill set of hands are light years ahead of the highest level of Dan Henderson and the highest level in terms of Bradley this weekend. night and day difference in hand speed, in the way they move, and the way their timing is. I mean, when the boxers want to hit you in a certain spot, they're going to hit you in a certain spot. They're not just going to wing it and hope it makes it. So it was interesting. It was very, very interesting watching both. And I encourage everybody to do that if you can one day. Watch the boxing and the MMA side by side and look at the differences. It is amazing.
And I don't even think that we could compare those two evenly just because of the size and the way that they fight. It'd be interesting if Almeida was a little older to compare like his hand speed to Bradley's, because it would be more of the same size guys, right? Because Bradley's 130 pounds.
Yeah, they're little guys, but still, even the skill set. Let's just say Thomas Almeida, totally different skill set hand-wise than Bradley. And it's not to dog MMA in any way, shape, or form. It's just it was just eye-opening to see the different speeds with their hands.
Well, I could really see that because you think about a boxer probably spends about 21 hours a week mostly working on his hands, and an MMA fighter about 5 to 7 hours a week, because you're also working kickboxing, Thai boxing, wrestling, jiu-jitsu. There's just so many disciplines that it's hard to do that, and that's why I find it, it's inspiring when you see the MMA fighters jump into a kickboxing fight or jump into a boxing fight, because even though they have a rough feeling of it, they have a feeling of it where they adapt it to a whole totally different surrounding.
So if I throw this, I might get taken down here, or I gotta reach for an underhook after I throw that kick. There's a lot going on.
And there are just totally different stances, right?
Yeah, totally, so. 100%. Speaking of boxing, or boxers, I should say, former world champion Holly Holm left for UFC 193 last Friday, and she's heading out there for this Saturday night. What's your thoughts on this main event?
My first thoughts is that we all need to stop acting like she's the biggest underdog in the history of the UFC. Because on the contrary, the woman challenging for the title in the co-main event, Valerie Letourneau, is actually on the books as the biggest underdog in a UFC title fight ever, taking on Joanna Jędrzejczyk. So Holly has all the ability in the world to pull off the stunner. Will it still be an upset? Yes, but it's not the biggest upset ever.
No, and I agree with you on that. And it's funny that everybody's saying, oh, she can't handle being a champion. She can't handle being... Well, she's been a multi-time champion. She's been a champion before Ronda Rousey ever even thought of putting on MMA gloves. She was a champion. She and Mike Winkeljohn reminded everybody at the press conference that she fought Christy Martin. And for those of you that don't know Christy Martin was the best woman boxer out there, just knocking ladies out on the undercard of Mike Tyson fights. She was the co-main event or the opening curtain jerker of the pay-per-view because she was that exciting. And she came here to fight Holly. And Holly was young then at a Sleda Casino. Nobody gave her a chance. Same kind of setup. And Holly put her almost through the ropes with one punch. Can Holly do it? Yes, she has that boxing mentality. She's got it. I believe she's got to use her boxing. I don't believe she's got to use the kickboxing, and that's one thing that I've been noticing more and more. As she gets into MMA, she's throwing a lot more kicks. She's relying more on her kicking than she is her boxing skill set, which I feel is a mistake in this fight. I think Ronda is so in love with her hands, so in lust with her hands, her false sense of her boxing skills.
She's coming out to make a statement with her hands.
And she's going to try and come out, and that's where Holly can catch her. Holly, I don't care if Ronda has way more power, this, that, and the other. No. Holly knows how to land a boxing punch. There is a difference between a boxing punch. Again, here's my point. There's a difference between a boxer boxing and an MMA fighter trying to be a boxer. It's just totally different. It is a night and day difference. And if Ronda, so be it, wants to step in there, which I believe she will, because she's full of emotion when she comes into that cage, that she rushes the person, she starts throwing, trying to do her boxing, and Holly can see all that coming. She's been in there with very, very good women boxers.
I'm interested just to see how it plays out that first minute, because how does that distance work? How does the movement work? Does Ronda come out that aggressive running at her? And how does Holly get away from that? Because these other girls, Raquel and Miriam that she fought, both really didn't get on her. They
didn't engage.
They let her set her pace, set
Yeah.
her tone. So this is going to be a different animal than any of the fights that we've seen Holly have in MMA before. And for the same instance for Ronda, not just with how great, how decorated Holly's striking is, but the fact that she is composed and she's not going to run right out at her and let her get flipped, tossed, or punched in the head in 16 seconds. I'd be surprised if Holly really lets her engage in the first 30 seconds.
Yeah, it is going to be interesting. And then you said Joanna Champion, of course. She's the co-main event, defending her 115 title. You really think she's the underdog, her opponent?
Well, this is according to the lines makers and all that. If anyone could pull off an upset, I'd give Letourneau that ability because she does have the clinch ability. Claudia Gadelha really did push on Jacek in her debut in the UFC. That was the closest fight she's had so far in her MMA career. And Letourneau is not a small 15er. She's fought at bantamweight in the UFC already. So she has those abilities. She trains at American Top Team. She's got world-class training. She has 4 wins by knockout, 1 win by submission, the same as the champion. So can she do it? I believe she could, but I'm still taking Joanna because she was able to deal with Gadelha's clinch game in jiu-jitsu and still keep it standing and win the decision. So that gives me the instinct that she would take this one. I think this will be closer though than what the Jessica Penne fight was.
And the other fun fight that I see on the main card of this event, UFC 193. Again, join us at Uptown Sports Bar and Grill. The Fight Shop New Mexico will be there as well. We're going to be giving away a Holly Holm t-shirt, autographs, gear, and whatnot. Mark Hunt, Antonio Silva.
Silva, not on TRT, getting knocked out.
Cold?
Cold.
I tell you what, I saw some pictures of Mark training. He looks very slimmed down, serious. It's going to be fun. Kyle Noak is also on the card.
Well, also, touch on the main card real quick. A fight that I think is being undersold is going to be Uriah Hall versus Robert Whittaker. Someone's getting knocked out, and someone's getting knocked out quickly in that one.
So you think that would be a fun fight? Also?
That's going to be a fun fight. Whittaker has some of the best boxing, I believe, in the UFC. His southpaw style can create problems for a lot of people. And Hall has, with that win over Gegard Mousasi, he was the one that knocked out Mousasi with that spinning back kick. He's found his groove and he's found his creativeness again, and that is really exciting, I think. And then, yes, Kyle Noak and Anthony Parash both spent their camps here at Jackson Wink MMA, and they're both going home to Australia to represent that homeland. And you also got Daniel Kelly on that card, and I believe he's a former Olympian in judo, so that's huge. Australia, these fans, they got a lot of their own on this card, and 70,000 people, and I can't wait to see that stadium, and I believe it's going to look like the old Cowboy Stadium. There's going to be a hole in the top. You're going to see that sun coming down in there. It's a middle of the afternoon event. That's the first thing. I can't wait to see that atmosphere on the Fight Pass prelims.
We're not talking about the Cowboys right now, okay? Please don't talk about it.
I meant the stadium. I was just talking about the stadium.
Last night, I don't want to hear about the Pigeons and them winning and whatnot. That was garbage. Anyway, you're hurting my heart right now.
I meant the stadium. I had nothing to do with football right now.
We are based out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. We had some local fights happen this past weekend. You were there live. Former tough contestant Andres Quintana was on the main event, correct?
He was in the main event, took on Jose Verdugo, who is a Mexican who was down here training with Jackson's Wink, is now residing up in Chicago with the Mike Valley Flow, Israel Martinez camp, so that's how the connection with Jackson's. And these guys, I think, took this fight, put it together like 2-3 weeks notice, this main event, and they had a slugfest for 3 rounds. The first round, Verdugo landed some vicious shots, right hooks to the head, some lefts to the body. He was really putting the pressure on Quintana, who in the second round was able to get his composure and started utilizing a kickboxing-based game and not just striking in the boxing realm. And when Quintana was able to go from ending his combinations with the kicks, he was really able to disrupt the distance, and Verdugo was hitting a lot of air and wasn't able to, again, put on so much pressure. Kind of a stressful moment at the end for Quintana. He took a knee to the top of the head and got busted wide open, blood flowing down his face, but it was like 5 seconds before the end of the fight, and they wailed on each other. It was amazing to see that they're both standing. They both took it. for their chins.
So Andres Quintana gets a split decision. Was it a true split decision, or
I thought
could it have gone either way?
It could have, but I really thought it was 29-28 because Verdugo landed the more powerful shots, but it was Quintana that landed a lot more because he just hit more with his combinations. He was landing a three-punch combination, finishing it with the low kick, and he was able to do that several times, as where Verdugo was landing powerful shots, but for the majority they were single shots. A couple times he was able to get some combinations to the body, but I thought going to the judges it was going to be 29-28 Quintana, and it was a split decision and tough fight. One of the best fights I've seen all year.
Interesting.
Locally.
Top three. We're getting closer to the end of the year. What are your top three right now?
Jackson's MMA series.
And let me explain this. I'm talking about the local MMA scene, not national fighters that are from New Mexico. More so the fact that the local
stuff that happened here in our state.
Yes.
Well, there was a Jackson's MMA series main event that saw Nick Urso and Josh Montoya go to war for 3 rounds. That was amazing not too long ago. Also, Jackson's MMA series, we got to see Nick Rhodes and Donald Sanchez go to war for 3 rounds. And then this Quintana Verdugo fight went 3 rounds, and I would have to say those are right now my 3 candidates for New Mexico MMA fight of the year.
Interesting. Also, I got to give a real quick congratulations to Santa Fe Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu founding professor Alberto Crane. Alberto Crane's fought for King of the Cage, UFC, and as well as he's the black belt. He used to also train out of Jackson's, or with Greg, I should say. He won the gold medal at World's No Gi. And then also to Gracie Barra, New Mexico's professor, Roberto Tusa Elencar, for winning second place at World's No Gi as well. He won. And then December the 5th, we're going to be having a 8-man gi sub-only jiu-jitsu tournament. The Fight Shop in New Mexico.
Announced the wrong date.
Yeah.
Because the 6th.
Oh, I'm sorry, December 6th. I'm thinking something else. Forget that. December 6th, I'm sorry. It's going to be having Battle of the Blue Belts. And if anybody's interested, you can reach out to me at fightshopnm@gmail.com, and we'll give you more info about it. Any of the jiu-jitsu heads out there that want to compete that are blue belt level, go ahead and hit me up, and we'll discuss all the logistics of the little tournament. It is free. You do have to get the approval of your coaches, professors, etc., and we'll go from there.
I'm talking about the local scene this weekend. Myself and Gomez Photo Works will be out in Alamogordo Friday night on the 13th. There's boxing. It said boxing, kickboxing, and Muay Thai on the poster. So get out there, an exciting night of striking and combat sports. And then the following Friday, King of the Cage Evolution. I'm so excited for this event. Women at the top of the card, a couple great male contests, and then we know it's going to be stacked with amateurs, and I believe there's actually going to be like 4 pro bouts, so that's a lot for King of the Cage.
Yeah, that's interesting. That is a lot of, because usually it's 1 or 2 pros, and then the rest filled with amateur undercard.
Yeah, but I believe this one's like 3 to 4, so it's a good size event. And then, like you said, come the 6th, we got the Battle of the Blue Belt, and then come the 19th, we'll see you guys in Hobbs, because Hard Knocks Promotions is having a boxing match, and tons of talent on that stat card.
Well, that's it for this week's edition of the DC Life Uncensored. I'm your host, Sal Mora. I got Cage Minds, Micah Frankel. Thank you for joining us for our first live taping of the DC Life Uncensored. Again, this weekend, come join the Fight Shop New Mexico at Uptown Sports Bar and Grill. And also stop by the shop and pick up your t-shirts for the Holly Holm fight. And we'll see you next Monday. We'll be giving your opinion. And if you guys ever want to join the show, come on into the shop. We're open right now, 6200 Coors Boulevard, Northwest in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And we'll be more than willing to talk with you and get your opinion as well on the fights that happened prior or that are coming up. No problem at all. That's it for this week's edition. We'll see you next week.